And I want to take a second to talk about what design is. We hear about so many different types of design. User experience design, UI, motion, product, graphic, visual. What are these all, how are these all connected? What does it mean? And to me, again, the only design I knew was very visual. The only people I knew who were designers were just impossibly cool people. They also seemed to always dress really well, and they just seemed to be born and they create beautiful things. And I thought, I'm none of those. So how am I gonna ever be a designer? It wasn't until I took a class called Muscle when I was in graduate school. And this class was taught by Nancy Nowacek, who is now a professor at Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken. And the class is called Muscle because it looked at how we make design decisions through our physical bodies in everyday life. So we explored design through dance and performance, and we learned about speculative design. And I started to see design not only on the screen, and I started to see design everywhere. And an example I really like to use is when you go to a restaurant. And if you go to a restaurant and you see a menu on the wall, you can probably make a few assumptions from that. That probably means that you walk up to the counter and you order from the menu on the wall. If they hand you a number to put on your table, you can probably assume that you'll put it on your table and someone's going to bring you your food. That's all design. Now think about every restaurant you've ever been to. If there's someone standing to greet you, that probably means they're going to seat you somewhere. So design is everywhere, and that started to really resonate with me, and a light turned on, and I thought, maybe I can do this. But just because you think you can do this, in order to get a job anywhere, you have to apply to the job, and you probably have to show some sort of evidence that you can do the job. So what could I put in my portfolio that would actually show that? I started to be really concerned about that, and especially about my lack of experience in design, because I did spend the first part of my career as a teacher. So how they just seemed completely unrelated. I just did not understand how I would be able to connect those two things. And I started to apply to internships between my first and second year in graduate school. And I am not kidding when I tell you that I applied to every single internship post that existed on every site that existed. I applied to be a mobile developer, front-end developer, an animator, a visual designer, anything that I could see I applied to. I got 2 interviews. I probably sent out 200 applications. And I was super lucky because I happened to be addicted to Facebook at the time, and I saw a Facebook post from somebody from IBM that was looking for a UI UX intern. And I applied, and these are actually 2 screens of the mock-ups that I created for my design challenge. I made them in Balsamic. I don't even know if Balsamic is a thing. Sketch wasn't even out yet. And even though it's sort of embarrassing to look back at this, I also love it so much, and because the visuals, not so great, but what I love is there's a lot of nice gems about how I'm talking about what the user is doing. And I got really lucky because that team at IBM was looking for somebody that was creative. They had a feeling that because I was able to make these physical projects that used a lot of creativity, that I could apply those same skills and transfer them into the digital world. And luckily enough, I was able to. I learned an incredible amount in my internship at IBM. I learned how to be resilient, I learned how to be compassionate, resourceful, adaptive. And when I say resourceful, I mean this is a huge takeaway. I think there's a misunderstanding about when you become an expert in something. I don't know if anyone's really an expert in any one particular thing. Maybe that's possible, but today there is a lot of people that know a lot of different types of things, and being resourceful means you're just gonna find the answer. So I would be asked to do something as an intern. When someone would walk away, I'd Google it, I'd text a friend that was a designer, I'd figure it out. And if I didn't know how to do it, I'd just ask somebody, and there's no shame in that. So I eventually became a full-time employee at IBM after I graduated, and even though everything seemed like it was on the surface going really well, I had this amazing internship that turned into a full-time position. This is incredible. But in my first year as a designer, I felt really insecure. My imposter syndrome started to kick in. I don't know if that exists yet for you guys, but that's basically the feeling of that you're not good enough and you're never going to be good enough. And you're comparing yourself to everybody around you. And especially for me, because I didn't have a background in design, I was definitely comparing myself to all of the coworkers I worked with that had been doing design since college. So I started to think about myself as a designer and myself as a teacher. And I thought about how I would start the year when I was a teacher. I'd introduce myself, and then I would start learning about my students, their names, a little bit about their personalities, their learning styles, their needs and wants. And what I was essentially doing was observational research that a designer does. And I would use all of that data that I was collecting from my students. And from that, I was able to adapt activities to fit the needs of how they learn. I was able to pair students that complement each other, plan lessons that match the students' interests. And then every day I would learn something new about my students. I would mentally record it, I would course correct, and then I would iterate on it the next day. And I started to notice that designers use the same kind of principles and methods that teachers do when they're planning lessons and creating a classroom experience. So I included this quote from Don Norman's book, The Design of Everyday Things, which is, "We have to accept human behavior the way it is, not the way we wish it to be." And this is the same thing teachers do with their students when they're teaching something new, and the same thing that designers do with their users when they're trying to redesign something. So then I realized users are to designers as students are to teachers. And once I realized this, I started to really appreciate everything that I've been through in my career. And I started to really apply and embrace everything that I learned as a teacher into my design practice. So today I am so appreciative of all those choices that I made, because I wouldn't have been where I was and where I am today. And all of that experience was really important. And I love this quote. I quoted Jim Carrey, which is, "Your past doesn't happen to you, it happens for you." But I just want to preface and then say that I actually originally heard it from Dog the Bounty Hunter, but when I Googled it, Jim Carrey came up. So just so you guys know. So I want to share a really quick story with you. Last week I was at a coffee shop and there was a little girl having lunch with her mom. This girl was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and she asked her mom, "What's a hobby?" And her mom replied, "It's a fun thing somebody does outside of work, but hobbies can turn into jobs." And I'm so thankful today because all of my hobbies have become my job. And my career trajectory has not been a straight line. It's had many twists and turns and different things I never expected, but now I see all of those moments as my gold stars. And maybe if I embraced the fear when I was younger, when I was in college, and I studied design and studied the things I wanted to, maybe I would have gotten here faster. But sometimes you need to take the crazy route to get where you were supposed to go in the first place. So I end this today. I want you to just walk away with a few things. I want you to remember to be brave, be kind, don't compare yourself to others because comparison is the thief of joy, and follow your curiosity. Thank you.